next meeting dedicated to work with trauma in these dramatic situations related to the war in Ukraine. We are trying to, thanks to our fantastic colleagues from all over the world, among them Lata McGinn, we're trying to improve, develop our skills of working with people who have experienced trauma of the war. I would like to welcome you, Professor, and I want to say we're very grateful for you joining our project with such enthusiasm. Immediately, you offered to support us, to give us very specific help and discuss a very important topic of psychological first aid, fostering psychological resilience in the wake of crisis, trauma, and adversity and war.
So thank you very much for this, Lata. We really are very grateful for your efforts, for your time, for being with us, for supporting us in such a concrete way. I just also want to say that the participants are really supporting one of our Polish NGOs by being here. They're supporting the NGO that is helping Ukraine in many different ways. And we really are very grateful for your support, for your help, for your donations, and for your time and willingness to learn more and more. So welcome to Poland, Lata, and welcome to your talk on psychological first aid.
Well, thank you, Iga, for putting this together and for inviting me to speak. It's my pleasure. And thank you to the team here, Joanna, Magda, and the others for putting this together. I'm delighted to be here. Iga, before I begin, I did not get any notification asking me if I wanted to translate it. So I just wanted to check in with you if there's something I should be doing before I begin.
Well, if this is okay, would you agree that we've got?
Oh, yes. I thought you wanted me to do something technical on my end to enable it.
Well, I don't know, Pani Magda. I understand that Lata knows everything now, and she's in full contact with the translators. Is this right?
Lata, you have to enable interpretation.
Any notification? Okay, I can hear you now. So let me begin. I think that being someone who can provide any help in a situation like that, I think makes all of us feel more in control and that we're doing something to help people. And so I thank all of you on this talk who have come here to learn how to best help people who are suffering as a result of the war that we're experiencing. These principles also apply to other traumatic events and other stress and other adversity. So if you ever have a chance to help people again, you can use these skills as well. I'm Lata McGinn. I'm professor at Yeshiva University, and I'm co-founder of Cognitive and Behavioral Consultants. Thank you to Iga and the team for inviting me. So before I get into what we're about to talk about, I just want to say that it talks about trauma and its effects and how to use psychological first aid to build resilience. Because it deals with the topic of traumatic events, please be advised that some of the content may create distress in you. So the talk that I'm going to be giving is divided into 3 sections. The first is to talk about the problem. The second is to talk about what we can think are positives in what's going on. What is the positive news? And then the third is the bulk of the talk, which is on psychological first aid. The third section is also divided into 3 sections. That will be look, listen, and link. So let's start with talking about the problem. There is a war in Ukraine, right? And this is why we're all here. So we know that from the United Nations and the World Health Organizations that it has directly impacted lives. People have lost their loved ones, their home, their shelter, things that keep all of us safe. It has impacted people all around the world, including neighboring regions like Poland. And hunger has become a big issue all over the world as a result of this war. So there are bigger problems that are coming from it. So 10 million people have become refugees as a result of this war. So we call this a traumatic experience for people. So what is a traumatic experience? When something life-threatening happens to you that is out of the range of what humans normally experience, we call that a traumatic event. So people who might directly experience it might be seeing others who have experienced it, or learning that it's happened to a close family member or friend. Or you are a helper and you might experience aversive details of the traumatic event. So, for example, if you are out there helping, you may be exposed to people who are injured. You might see, houses destroyed. You might see aversive details if you're a helper. So that also can traumatize you. So again, what we're facing today is on top of what the world has already been facing. So the whole world has been suffering as a result of the pandemic. And so that means that the people in Ukraine, their resources were already lower. It means your resources are lower. Your stress level is already high. As a result of the pandemic, we've experienced economic downturns. There has been socio-political upheaval in the world. And now on top of all that, there is a war. So this is what we call a traumatic event. So there are many other examples. So certainly war, terrorism comprise traumatic events. Doing military combat is one source of terror. If you lose a friend or family to suicide or an accident, if you experience shootings in your workplace, get injured, if you're physically or sexually assaulted or trafficked, if you have accidents of any sort, car accidents, civilian disasters such as the pandemic, fires, earthquakes, hurricanes, all of these comprise traumatic events. So what is a physical consequence when something like this happens, when crises happen and traumatic events? We know that physically individuals, families, entire communities may be affected. People, for example, in Ukraine, may have lost their homes, their schools, their loved ones, be separated from family, community, and need to relocate. And this is what Poland is facing, where a lot of refugees have come into Poland. As a result, people may have lost access to food, shelter, their medical assistance, and they may have seen things that are violent. They may have seen property destruction. They may have seen death up close. So these are all the physical consequences when a traumatic event like a war occurs. And then there are psychological consequences. So everyone is affected by a traumatic event psychologically, but people have a range of reactions to traumatic events. Some people may have no reactions. Some people may have very mild reactions. Some people may have very intense reactions. However, all of that is normal, and it can take days, weeks, months, or longer to fade. And these are all normal. These are reactions, are your body and mind's way of processing and adjusting to an experience that is out of the range of normal human experience. So as a result, your mind doesn't know where to place the traumatic event. So the analogy I will give you is that of a computer. So it's like a file that doesn't know what folder to go into. So as a result, it stays in the RAM memory of the computer, which is that temporary storage of the computer that allows you to pull up files very quickly. So when something traumatic happens, your brain keeps that memory of the traumatic event very uppermost in your mind. So it allows you to think about it over and over again. And ultimately, it helps you adjust. And ultimately, it goes into a folder where it doesn't affect you as much over time. And so this has been studied since, before World War I, where we know that all these reactions are normal, and over time, people will recover. So this is what we know. However, some people may need more assistance, right? So people who might have already experienced severe or multiple or chronic trauma, or may have had certain types of trauma. So let's say if someone who experienced the war in Ukraine and then was sexually assaulted, that would be an example of someone who might need more assistance. If people have a personal or a family history of psychological conditions, then that makes them more vulnerable to reacting to trauma in a way that they might need more help. Or they may not have as much social support, or they might have a physical health or disability. Sometimes people who are vulnerable, like the elderly or children or people from marginalized groups, so different ethnic cultures or women, may be more affected by this and may need more assistance. So this is the second part of the talk, which is what could possibly be positive about what's going on, because what's going on is so hard and difficult and horrible. So let's take in some good news. And the good news is that we know from research, actually dating back to the Renaissance, that human beings are generally resilient, even when they face the worst crises or traumatic events like this war. So the bulk of this were sort of observations from things like wars that we have noticed, but we also know there are research studies that show no matter what traumatic event you experience, the bulk of the people who experience them will recover physically and psychologically over time. And sometimes, and some people are affected more than others, and they might need more help. So they might need evidence-based treatments such as CBT to adjust or recover, and that's okay too. So that news is good. The more good news is that psychological first aid is strategies that teaches very practical skills that are very easily learned. And the good news there is that it helps you build that resilience, that ability to be strong when something happens to you, when something traumatic happens. So let's talk about psychological first aid. Now, this is the third part of the talk, and this is the longest section. So it itself will be divided into 3 sections: look, listen, and link. So before we get into that, let's talk a little bit about what psychological first aid is, who needs it, who gets help by it, where you do it, just basic facts like that. So let's talk about what psychological first aid is. It's not treatment, it's not psychotherapy, it's not counseling. It really is knowledge that we have gained with evidence about practical strategies that actually allow us to use our own natural ability to be resilient, and it builds on that. And it's based on findings that human beings are resilient and have an innate ability to cope. So psychological first aid, I will also refer to it as PFA, so psychological first aid. The acronym is PFA. So PFA involves humane, supportive, and practical assistance for people who are feeling very upset and distressed, but in a way that respects their dignity, their culture, and their ability in that moment. Also, psychological first aid is not given on its own. It's part of that broader emergency network. such as the Red Cross or other units, like the government. So there's a whole team of people who tend to help when something like a war occurs. So psychological first aid is one part of it that deals with the psychology of the person. But it isn't psychotherapy. So who can provide PFA? People who are trained to provide PFA, like the people on this talk, are people who can provide PFA to people who have suffered a traumatic event. So that means that both professionals and lay people can be trained to provide PFA. And then who does PFA help? Research shows that really individuals of all ages, genders, religions, cultures, who are affected by a traumatic event or a personal crisis or a disaster, or a man-made disaster such as the war in Ukraine. And whether they are survivors, witnesses, or responders like you, helpers, that we know that it can help everybody, because we know that when something like that happens, that people may struggle with or face new challenges following the event. It's equally important that caregivers of people, so people on this call who are affected, also it helps. So that way you help yourself and then you help them cope with what they're going through. The thing to keep in mind is that some people will be fine even if they don't get PFA. And then some people will need more help than PFA. So keep that in mind, that we are not forcing PFA on people. If people are open to it and need it, then we provide PFA for them. But we don't want to force anybody to get PFA, and some people will be fine anyway. And as I mentioned, some people will need more help. So where is PFA offered? It could be offered really anywhere that's safe and that has some privacy. So it could be often offered in the field. So for example, at a shelter, at a disaster site. It could be offered in a school setting. Let's say the traumatic event occurred there, in a work setting. It could be offered in the house. It could be offered in the office. It can be offered remotely. The most important thing to remember is that where it's offered should be physically safe to you and to the person that you're providing it. So we don't want to put anyone in danger while providing PFA. So if you're about to provide PFA, you have to make sure that you are safe and that the person is safe. And to the extent possible, having some privacy, which will then respect the dignity of the person to whom you are providing PFA. So now, when does PFA help? Okay, really when someone is in distress, someone is upset, during, immediately after, or shortly after something traumatic happens to them. So you can offer it in the days, weeks, months following a traumatic event. So the people of Ukraine may have this going on for a while. So you could provide it even afterwards. And it could be an emergency or a non-emergency. It could be a personal crisis they're facing or the larger crisis that we're facing today. So before we get into what it does and how you help people, we have to importantly go over some things that PFA does not do, okay? So it's really important that we not ask people to discuss the traumatic events that they're experiencing right after they've experienced it. Our brain is built in such a wonderful way. It allows you to be in shock when it first happens. So we don't want to pierce that shock. So we want to be able to help them, support them because they're upset, but we are not requiring them to tell us what happened to them in detail, right? We also don't want to put people in groups and ask them to discuss the trauma. Okay, there used to be an intervention called CISD that would do that. And we found through studies that that would actually be harmful for people. So we don't want to ask people to discuss whatever traumatic events they're going to. unless they want to. You're not asking them. So you're not putting them in groups. And the very, very important point here is that we don't want to assume or suggest to people who have experienced a traumatic event that they will develop a problem, or they may be at risk for developing PTSD or mental health conditions. We know from research, both in humans and animals, that when we are under stress, our minds are more suggestible, meaning we believe what people say when we are under stress. So your role as a helper, as a volunteer, is so powerful that it's important that you not, while trying to help this person, not assume or suggest that they will react badly to the war. Okay, you're not going to suggest that they're going to develop a problem. You're not going to suggest that they're going to develop PTSD and or other mental health conditions. One, I shared the positive news in the second section of the talk, which is that most people turn out to be fine. So research actually supports you in saying that. So this is really important because we know that the more people assume they're going to have a problem, it actually makes them have a problem in the future. So this is really important. We also don't want to assume that we know what people are experiencing or what they have been through without asking them. We want to ask them what they're experiencing or what they have been through. PFA also doesn't talk down to the person or focus on a person's weaknesses or judge them or predict or minimize. Sometimes it's hard for helpers to see people suffering. So we might have the urge to say things like, you'll be fine, or you got to be strong, or don't worry, it'll be fine. And even if you mean well, those kinds of statements are not helpful to people who are suffering. So it's important that you talk to them like you're talking to a friend, and you are talking to them and just listening and hearing them, but you're not judging them and you're not predicting them, and you're not trying to make the problem any less than it is. The third is that it's very important not to give them inaccurate information. When a war occurs or a crisis or a trauma like that, there's so much information that is missing. Rumors happen. So as a result, you may not know everything, and information may keep changing as information comes in. So it's extremely important not to provide inaccurate information. If you don't know, it's better to say, I don't know. I can try to find out. We also don't want to assume that everybody wants to talk to us or needs to talk to us just because they are going through a traumatic event. So for you, if you are going up to somebody, you don't want to assume that they want to talk to you, okay? And even if they talk to you, we don't want to press them for any details or encourage any detailed discussion of what they're facing that is making them upset, okay? So we know from research that if you press people to share their reactions and feelings right after something traumatic has happened, or trying to get them to think about it, analyze it, that is not helpful, right? They're in shock. They just need support at this moment. So what is the goal then? Okay, now that we've learned what we shouldn't do, what is the goal of psychological first aid or PFA? Essentially, we just want to reduce their stress, and we just want to assist them in recovering, in a healthy recovery following a traumatic event, right? Or a crisis that they're feeling. So we want to reduce the upset, how upset they are, and we want to help them cope better in the short term, right now, and also help them cope in the future. So the way I want you to think about it, as I mentioned, is not psychotherapy or counseling. Think about people who get a bone fracture, right? So when your bone gets fractured, most of the time, what does the doctor do? All he does is he or she will take the two bones that have broken, put them together, and put a cast over it. The goal of the cast is to put the bones together so that the bones can heal on their own. And that really is what PFA does, that you are just putting things together that will naturally help their mind recover on their own. So what does PFA do to achieve these goals? Basically, you're providing them with very practical assistance without invading their privacy. You're trying to understand, what do they need right now? Okay, you're helping them feel heard without placing the pressure to speak. You're comforting them. You're helping them feel safe, calm, supported. And then at the end, you're giving them some skills to build resilience. You're also connecting them to other people. You're connecting them to services, loved ones, social supports, and above all, you're protecting them from further harm. So that's what PFA does to achieve those goals. So the first section, we talked about what the problem is, the war, and what impact that has on people, right? And then we talked about what's the good news, what's the positive. Now we come to the third section of PFA. Now we've learned about what it is, where to offer it, who does it, who gets help by it, when to do it, and what the goal is. Now we learn how to do it. So first I'll talk about how to offer PFA to others, which is what all of you will be doing for the people of Ukraine. So there are primarily three sections to this: look, listen, and link. However, before you start that, you also are going over and preparing. So preparing is very important. So as you're already preparing. So by listening to this talk, you're already preparing. And then there are other things you need to do to prepare to be a volunteer. And then after you do that, then when you're ready to do it, then you look, listen, and then you link. So let's talk about, other than attending this workshop, the way that you prepare is to learn about the situation. It's extremely important that you figure out all the details of what's going on to the best you can, as well as the specific circumstance the person is facing. What happened, when it happened, where did it take place, how many people were affected, have they lost their house, who are they, where did they live before, are they separated from their loved ones? Like finding out as much as you can. You're also learning about all the available services and supports. Is the Red Cross there? Will there be food aid? Right? Are there blankets there? Is there material for kids? And then who else is helping? Like finding out, because as I mentioned, PFA is not offered in isolation. So you have to find out what are the other services and supports offered. And then you also have to figure out whether there's a safety or security concern. Is the crisis for this person, well, it's not going to be over, but is it continuing? Are they still in danger? What dangers may be in their environment? Are there areas to avoid because they're not safe or secure, or you're not allowed to be there? So as much information you can find about the war, about the person's specific circumstances, and what services and supports can help them, it's really important. So then let's move on to look, right? So the first part is looking. What are you looking for? You're looking for safety, you're looking for needs, and you're looking to see who's upset. So there are 4 parts of it, right? So one is you're trying to figure out whether a person is safe. And then as you're looking around, there might be a lot of people that need help. And if you're going up to them, who do you go up to? Well, first you go up to people who need to be safe, right? Then people who have obvious basic needs, like you see someone whose clothes are torn, might need a blanket, or somebody's shivering. And then there are people who are more upset than others. You might go up to them. Or you might look for people who are more vulnerable, okay? So we talked about children, we talked about the elderly as examples. So this part of it is you're looking to see who is, first of all, you're looking to see if the situation you're entering is safe. Because as a volunteer, you want to make sure, again, that you are not placing yourself in danger. So you're looking to see if the situation you're entering is safe. And then you're trying to see whether, and if it isn't, if you are finding that you're approaching someone who is not in a safe situation, you want to be at a distance enough and see if you can help them, okay? And then what you're doing is you're trying to protect their safety. They don't have a place to stay, or they don't have clothes on them, right? You're trying to figure out whether the person who you're approaching has a need for safety. Then who else are you looking for? You're looking for people with obvious, urgent physical needs. Does anyone have urgent physical needs? Do they look thirsty? Are they hungry? Do they feel, are they shivering? Are they crying? Okay, so people with obvious urgent physical needs may need to be referred to those who can help, right? So if there are any physical needs, you may or may not. You may be able to give somebody a glass of water, but if someone needs something beyond that, like they need medication, you might need to refer them to someone who can provide medical help. So the first thing is to look and see who needs help physically. The second is looking to see who needs help psychologically. And this is where PFA helps the most, right? So when people go through a traumatic event, right, they have a lot of different emotions, and all of these emotions are normal to have. They might have anxiety, they might be afraid, they might have panic attacks, they might be sad, they might be crying uncontrollably, they might be expressing that grief to you, or they could be angry, irritable, frustrated. Maybe they're blaming themselves. Maybe they're feeling guilty that they left their spouse in Ukraine and they're now here in Poland. Maybe they feel some shame. I should have left before, right? Maybe they're very reactive. No matter what you say, they get more angry. Or you might find someone who is feeling nothing. They look calm. They're not experiencing any emotion. Sometimes people feel elated. They might feel happy that they recovered, that they are no longer in Ukraine, that they came to Poland. So any of those reactions is normal. Okay, from an evolutionary perspective, we know that all of these emotions are normal human emotions. And these human emotions are there to protect us. The reason we have emotions is to help us move towards survival. So anxiety is a common reaction to danger. Now, everybody you're going to be helping is going to have some anxiety, fear, right? Because what they've experienced is very dangerous to their life and their way of living. So it's completely normal. And the good thing about these emotions is that the reason they're there is to actually help you overcome. And so when you feel anxiety, you can run faster, you can actually do many things that actually help them prepare for future dangers. So it's important for you to know that no matter how somebody is reacting, that it's normal. But for you, this becomes a sign that they need your help. So when you're looking to see who needs help, if you see someone having these emotions, and sometimes you can't tell what someone's feeling inside, but you can see physical sensations that they are showing, like they're shaking, or they look tense, or they look restless, they can't sit still, or they're very jumpy. You say something and they react very quickly, or they tell you that their appetite or sleep is affected, or they look tired, or they're not listening, they can't concentrate. So many such physical sensations will give you a clue that if I'm looking to see there are a lot of people who need my help, who should I go to? If someone has obvious emotional distress, that would be a signal for you to help them. You also want to look for people who are more upset or confused. Now, some people, when they have something traumatic happen to them, right, they react a little bit more. So you might see somebody who's not moving, sitting apart from people, very quiet, not speaking, not responding to you or responding to anybody. Sometimes when something like this happens, people get confused. We call that being disoriented. They don't know their name, they don't know where they're from or what happened to them. And so when you see them, they might seem confused, or they're not saying anything, or they're saying they're feeling nothing, or they feel or they express that they're not feeling in their right mind. Or you see somebody and you see a mother who's not able to take care of her children because she's just sitting by herself. Or you might see somebody who's not eating or drinking or not able to make simple decisions. So when people are more upset or confused, there are other things you can do, and we'll be going over that later. And then, of course, looking for people and helping people who are vulnerable. So children and adolescents need more help and more support. Human children and adolescents are not able to take care of themselves without adults. So especially if they're separated from their families, or if their families are not able to help them. And then people with health conditions, they might have asthma, or they might have a mental health condition, or they might be disabled, they might be deaf, or they can't see, or they might not be able to walk. So these are people who are going to need more of your help. And then there might be people who are at risk for discrimination or violence. So people, for example, young girls or people of certain ethnic or cultural groups might be more vulnerable. So people might discriminate against them, they might exploit them. So it's always important to help people who are vulnerable. So looking for them. So once now, and again, you may be either entering a situation where there are lots of people who need your help, in which case, look will really help you figure out who to help. If someone has been brought to you, or you are entering a situation where there's only one person, then listen, you don't have to do look if you already know who you're helping. But the look part is really helpful because often when something like a war occurs, there's so many people who need help and you can't help all of them right away. So in the second part, now you're listening to them, and there are different parts of listen. So first is approaching people. So how do we approach people who may need support? And then how do we ask them about what they need? And then how do we listen in a way that helps them feel calm? So this is what this second section of PFA will cover. So the first part of listen is to approach, which just means you're making contact with somebody. The goal is you go up to somebody, or if someone comes up to you, you respond in a manner that is kind, compassionate, helpful. So you're taking the initiative to approach and respond to someone in need. And if they don't reach out, you can actively reach out. And otherwise, if someone is coming to you, you want to maintain a stance where you're open to others who approach you. And then you are speaking to them in private to the extent possible. At this moment, you want to approach them with care. So I mentioned being calm, kind, compassionate. And you also have to be culturally sensitive. That based on that person's culture, you may or may not know certain things about that culture. So being culturally mindful is very important. Now it's time to ask. So now we're going to be providing people with the opportunity to share what they're going through, and then to find out what they need. Now, they may need a lot of things, but you're trying to find out what their basic and pressing needs are. You are not going to be able to solve all their problems. So at this point, you are just inviting them and giving them an opportunity to share. And how do you do that? First, by just acknowledging what has happened, okay? They've just gone through a war. They've left their homes. They've come to Poland. So acknowledging what has happened is important. And then letting them know that it's okay to share what they've gone through. It's okay for them to share their feelings with you or any concerns that they have. But at the same time, you want to make sure that they only share, that you tell them that they only need to share what they're comfortable sharing with you. And all the time you are being alert for any safety concerns. If you learn anything at this point that the person is not in safety, that's the most important part of this. So right now you've gone up to them and you are just giving them an opportunity to share. And so at this point, now you need to figure out what do they need. So find out what their immediate worries and needs are. You don't want to go into detail or ask for any in-depth descriptions. And you might find that the person that you're trying to help starts to worry about the future. They might say things like, oh my goodness, is my home okay? Will I ever go back to Ukraine, right? And what you want to do is redirect them to the present needs. What can you help them with today? And then as they share what they need at this moment, you are summarizing it to make sure that you understand correctly. Even if you speak the same language, it's important that what the person is saying is still that you let them know that you've understood it correctly, in case there is something that you have misinterpreted. And once they tell you all the needs they have, they may have a lot of needs. So then you have to find out what is the most pressing need and concern today. So you're focusing on needs that are realistic, practical, and achievable. So if someone says to you, will I ever go back to my homeland? You will not be able to answer that question. You can say, I understand that you're upset. It must be hard not knowing when you're going back. How can I help you with what you need today? And then you're trying to make it realistic, practical, and achievable. And the third part is the actual listening. And this is a really, really important part where you are letting them know as they're talking that you understand what they're going through, that you are there to keep them safe, and you are there to provide comfort physically and emotionally. So listening, giving them your full attention, listening closely, staying close to them, and listening is really important because then you're not distracted, you're not trying to do other things, you're not on your phone, you are giving them your full attention and you're listening closely. And then it's time to put yourself in their mind, in their place, and see the world through their mind. How would it be if you had left your homeland, if you couldn't find your spouse, if you didn't know where you were going to live? And then you have to communicate that to them. So the person that you're talking to has to feel that you are interested in listening, that you're there, available to help, and that you understand what they're going through. You're also letting them know their reactions are normal. It's very hard for people who may not have been upset before when they feel anxious or they're crying or they're angry. They might feel, what's wrong with me? Why am I reacting like this? Or let's say they have no feelings. They might be thinking, what is wrong with me? I don't feel anything. No matter what, you are letting them know that their reactions are normal and without any judgment. If you feel that their reactions are excessive, it doesn't matter. You are communicating that their reactions are normal. And it's really important for us as well as helpers to help people who are suffering, letting them know that their suffering is real. Because it's so painful to see people who are upset that we have a tendency to want to make them feel better right away, that it's going to be okay, everything is fine. Everything is not fine. So you are helping them to know that their reactions are normal and that you get how hard this is. I know how hard it must be not to know where your husband is. It must be so scary to not know where you're going to live or ever go back to Ukraine. I get it. I understand. That has a powerful effect. We know from research that really has a powerful effect on the person that you're trying to help. And for some people, just that alone will be sufficient. But you also, once you've listened and communicated that you understand, you want to also help them with emotional and physical comfort and safety. So as I mentioned, giving people accurate information is really important, giving them honest, accurate information, and communicating that they're not alone, that you are there to support them, that you're there to help them feel safe, and that you will move them to a safe place if needed, and that you are there to provide physical and emotional support of the most basic needs. So this way, by listening, by communicating, and by letting them know what you can do, that you are there to provide them with comfort and safety, that will really help get their emotions down and get them to listen to you. Now, I mentioned that some people might be so upset that they're not able to listen to you. They might be confused, they might be overwhelmed, they might not know who they are, what they're doing, they might be dazed. Or they might be so upset, they might be crying a lot and you can't even get them to listen to you, right? So we have these techniques that we use to calm people. We call it grounding techniques. So we help them just feel a little bit better. So the most important thing if someone is confused or so upset is that you remain calm and you continue to normalize how they're feeling. So you do want to give them some space, not crowd them. You can still say, I'm there to help here, remaining calm, quiet, present, and then you're not trying to invade their privacy. You're not asking them a lot of questions, okay? You're just continuing to say, I understand you're upset. I completely get it. This must be so hard. You know, what you've gone through, I get it, right? Continue putting yourself in their shoes. It must be so difficult. I get how hard this is for you. Now that you're continuing to do that still. However, some of them may need more. So what we do in moments like this is to keep people in the present moment because they're so upset because they're thinking of the past, they're thinking of the future, and that's what's making them confused or upset. So what we do is we give them tools to keep them in the present moment if they're confused or disoriented. So you might say, tell me your name, tell me where you're from, where are you right now, who am I, you know? So that just that alone will help bring people to the present moment. There are many, many other ways that you can do. You can just ask them to take a deep breath, breathe deeply. You can also invite them to use their senses to experience the moment, okay, the environment, where they are. No matter where you are, you're asking them to use their senses, their eyes, their ears, their nose, whatever you can do to experience the environment, that tends to bring people down. Now, I'm about to show you a video that we sometimes will show people to give them a sense of how to do it. So I'm going to show it to you next. And that gives you a sense, but that's only one tool. You can ask them to recite a poem. You can ask them to write down their name. You can play a game with them, right? Anything to bring them to the present moment.
This technique will take you through your 5 senses to help remind you of the present. This is a calming technique that can help you get through tough or stressful situations. Take a deep belly breath to begin. Number 5. Look. Look around for 5 things that you can see and say them out loud. For example, you could say, I see a burger. I see a bird. I see a soccer ball. Number 4. Feel. Pay attention to your body and think of 4 things that you can feel and say them out loud. For example, you could say, I feel my feet warm in my socks. I feel the hair on the back of my neck. Or I feel the pillow I'm sitting on. Number 3, listen. Listen for 3 sounds. Say the things out loud. It could be the sound of running feet, an airplane flying by, or the sound of a dog barking. Number 2, smell. Say 2 things you can smell. It's okay to move to another spot and sniff something. If you can't smell anything at the moment, or you can't move, then name 2 of your favorite smells. Number 1, taste. Say 1 thing you can taste. It may be the toothpaste from brushing your teeth, or the flavor of your bubblegum. If you can't taste anything, then say your favorite thing to taste. Take another deep belly breath to end.
So this is called a 5-4-3-2-1 exercise. Now, depending on where you are, it may not be possible for them to use their sense of taste or use their sense of smell. But even if you don't do it exactly that way, you're still asking them to use and say, what can you see? Can you tell me what you see today? Who is here? Right? You can use any of them, but the idea is to use the senses to bring them down. Now we come to the third part, okay? You've looked to see who needs help. You have listened to them and given them some comfort. And now you are linking them to information, supports, and services. Now, PFA is not intended to be this ongoing intervention. This may be the only time you talk to this person. So as a result, you have to give them what they need to help themselves. We know that people have an innate ability to cope. So building on that and allowing them to connect to information, supports, and services that will be of help to them is extremely important. So this is the third part, where you are now helping them to stand on their feet. And even if it is someone you're seeing again, your goal is to allow them to help themselves. When people have gone through something traumatic, they feel out of control. So giving them all these resources allows them to regain their sense of control. And that is critical. So what are you linking them to? You're linking them to practical items they may need or resources for their very basic needs. Now, when you listen to them and you ask them, you found out what their basic needs are, and you have prioritized it. You've helped them prioritize it and make it realistic. So now it's time to link them to that. Some of the needs they have may not be some things that you can give them. So you have to link them to information and services. You also might need to help them with either their loved ones and social support. And ultimately, you leave them with information on how to feel and function better and cope with problems when something traumatic happens. So what are examples of basic practical needs that people who are surviving the war may need? They might just need simple things like blanket, food, water, shelter, sanitation. They might be injured and need some medical care, in which case you are linking them to that. Or they might, have a chronic medical condition. They might have asthma and they need an inhaler and they don't have one. So again, linking them to that. Above all, you're focusing on safety and protection. So, but people who've gone through this traumatic event will have so many questions for you. Okay, they might have questions about the event, about their loved ones, about what services they can do. And that's why the preparation part is so important for you. Sometimes people just want someone who is willing to listen. And now you've already done that, right? And so that may be enough. Sometimes practical needs that they have, they want to be able to contact their loved ones. They might need a telephone to call somebody. It's also the case that people might have some specific support they need related to their culture or religion. And so being mindful of, respectful of their culture and religion, and asking them what are needs they may have. They may want to pray. They may want some items so that they can pray, right? So that is important, that they might need some specific support. Or they might want to be consulted and involved in decisions that affect them, right? You are helping them as part of an NGO, and it may be that you know something about what's going to happen to them. And they keep in mind that the person you're helping with might want to be consulted and involved in these decisions that are affecting them. So these are some of the basic practical needs that many survivors have. So let's start with just linking them to the practical items or resources for their basic needs, right? So now that you found out what they need, you can give them the blanket, give them food, give them water, even just giving them a glass of water if you see that they're thirsty. You're continuing to listen, offering support, right? And there might be unique needs. So for example, there might be somebody who needs for their child to be fed, they might need a bottle or a cup, okay, or something to soothe the baby, right? So there might be specific needs that they have that you can either give them or get for them. All the while you're continuing to listen, you're continuing to offer comfort. And if this is the last time you're going to see them, and you follow up and you say, I'm going to follow up with you, if that's possible, then you need to follow up. But if you can't, then you're not promising that at all. So this is sort of physical needs. But the most important part, once those practical things like blankets or sort of physical things, you have to link them to available information and services that they need now or they will need in the future. So they might need information, for example, there are only certain things that you can provide, so they might need to link them to others who can meet other needs, such as the Red Cross. And again, you want to build on their ability to be strong, naturally strong, so you can give them practical suggestions for how they can meet their own needs. How can they register to receive food aid? How can you help them to be able to register as opposed to registering for themselves? Of course, if they're not able to register for themselves, then offering to do it. But to the extent you can, helping them to help themselves is really important, because what we know is that people feel so out of control. So as a result, as soon as they start to feel that they can take care of themselves, they start to feel better. So you're meeting their needs and you're helping them to meet their needs. And again, there's so much rumor. There's so much information you won't have. So it's important to, again, give them the information you have. If you know something, it's important to share it. What happened? They may not even know the extent of the war going on, right? They may not have heard everything that's going on. They may not know what's happening to them. They may not know anything about their loved ones. They may have questions about their safety. So as a result, making sure you say to them, I don't know the answer to that question, but I'm going to find out for you. Okay. And then it's important that you tell them where you're getting this information from. One, because that way, if they want to get that information, they can go there. But also, so they realize that this is not your opinion, that you are relying on some source to give them this information. And that way, if that source was inaccurate, they will realize that later, right? The idea is that you're not answering questions as if you have all the answers. So you're finding information on all available services and treatments that are available to them. And then if you can, then following up on recommendations if possible. Now we know from research that the biggest buffer against mental illness is social support. So connecting people with their loved ones is really important, and other types of social support. So keeping families together, not separating them, right? And for people who are alone, right? You're helping to share why it's important, okay? How important it is to have social support, how important it is to have social connection, and to follow their cultural rituals. You can also share how important it is to talk to people we trust and share their problems. You're not forcing them to share, to you or to anybody else, but you're just communicating that if they trust anybody and they want to share, they can. And again, you're reminding them there's no need to share details. You don't have to feel pressure to share anything. But social connection is important. It is important to find some people that you trust. And that's going to help with your recovery. And then once you've communicated how important it is, then you are linking them to that support. Now, one is you are that support person for now. So you can spend time with them. And depending on what you're doing with them and you're waiting for something, right? You can do an activity with them. You can listen to a song with them. You can play a game, anything to get their mind off, right? And communicating that you are there as a source of support. And then you're connecting them to others who can spend time with them. And then we know from research that if you support others, and this is why this is the good news for us, that supporting others is helpful for your own mental health. So as helpers ourselves, that helps you cope with this terrible war that's going on. So if you see people who have some strength, and when you were listening to them, you were asking them questions, and you found out how they might have reacted to prior crises. If something, some trauma or crisis or stressful situation happened before, finding out how they reacted before can help you. So if you learn, for example, that what they did then was help other people, or they seem to you able to help other people, see if they can help other people in the room right there. Maybe they can help you. And so that way they can find safe ways to help others, connect with other people, other refugees in the area. So finding safe ways, so not affecting their safety, but finding safe ways to help others in the crisis and getting involved in whatever community activities will actually wind up helping themselves. So you have linked them to items they need, objects, you have linked them to services, and now you're linking them to people who can give them support and social connection just like you. And at the end, you're helping them, you're just giving them information. Now, remember, these are some of the tools I'm going to show you is what we go over in therapy once people come to us. But at this point, what you're doing is you're just giving them information. You're giving them information on how to do things that will help them feel better and function better in this moment. So the first part is to educate them. You're letting them know how people commonly react to stress, to trauma, and you are communicating that it's normal to feel all these emotions, right? That it's completely natural for people not to feel something or to feel too much. And that even people who feel very, very intensely turn out to be fine over time. Now, of course, this war. We don't know when it will end. So we don't know how long this is going to go on for. But still, what you're communicating is how commonly people react. You're letting them also know that what they do and what they don't do can make things better for them or worse for them. And so that way you're giving them information about what kinds of things we know, what lessons have we learned about what helps people when they go through a traumatic event. And as I mentioned earlier, ask them what they've done well in the past to cope with very difficult situations. And then you can invite those tools as well, because people have very natural coping ability. So the way they've coped in the past, if that applies here, helping them to use that is really important. You can also help them plan about what stressful things may be coming up. So it sounds like tomorrow you're going to apply for food aid. And it sounds like then you will hear about, what happened to your husband. So this is going to be a very hard day for you, right? You're anticipating what kinds of stressful things might be coming up for this person. So beyond educating them on what helps, what doesn't help, you're giving them that information now. If they're already doing things that are helpful, you're praising them. And then you're giving them information on basic skills. Any problems that you can help with, solving any day-to-day problems, they seem confused, right? Their problem solving is affected when we're under stress. So if they say, well, I don't know if I should go here first or there first, you can help problem solve. And you can work with them and encourage them to create a plan, okay? And help them cope based on the skills that you're giving them. Here are some skills that you can provide beyond what we've already discussed. What we know is that what we do when we're under stress or going through a traumatic event can help us or not help us, right? So what is helpful to do? It's important to get enough sleep. And this is what you're telling them, right? And you're doing for yourself. Getting enough sleep, resting, taking breaks, eating healthy meals, drinking water regularly. We also know that sticking to routine, structure, making things predictable. So any family or cultural rituals, to the extent possible, of course, they're not in their home environment. They can't do everything they did back home. So to the extent you can help them follow a routine and do any of the rituals that were important to them, it's really important. You're letting them know that any kind of taking walks, any kind of exercise, even if it means walking around in a room, or using methods to relax and be in the present moment, whether it's walking, whether it's breathing deeply, or just using self-talk to calm themselves down. If they're religious, helping them to see that prayer can help them, music, and you're emphasizing that doing practical things in the here and now is really important, that their mind will keep taking them to the future. And it's important for them to figure out something practical they can do today to get back to normal as much as possible. Now, again, you've already mentioned this to them, but talking to people they trust and spending time with family and friends. And if they don't have their family or friends there, then whatever social connection that you're connecting them, spending some time with them is important. And again, you spending time with them is already doing that. Now, what are things that are better not to do? Now, these are all things when in the United States, when we had 9/11, I was part of a task force where we found this information, like what was helpful to do and what was helpful not to do. So when someone goes through something traumatic, like experiencing a war, sometimes a medical doctor might need to give them a sedative to sleep in the first few days because it's hard. And that's okay. However, what you're telling them is that we know from prior research that when you've gone through something traumatic, not taking drugs, smoking, or drinking alcohol, or coping by sleeping all day, or on the other hand, just working all the time and not allowing themselves to rest or relax is not good. So you're emphasizing that on the one hand, you want them to do something practical to help themselves. You want them to follow a routine, and you want them to rest and relax. And they might feel guilty. How can I relax when there's a war raging in my country? And it's important for them to know that they will not be able to help themselves or help anybody else if they don't spend time and rest and relax. You also want to help them feel like they need to attend to their personal hygiene. That routine of brushing your teeth and getting ready and taking a shower, if it's a man, shaving, right? All of the things. And these are the kinds of things you would have asked them, like, what do you need right now? So helping them to say that when people, then it's important not to neglect your basic personal hygiene. Now, sometimes, as I mentioned, when people have gone through what they're going through, right, they might get angry. What you're saying is it's normal to feel angry, and I still need you to not be aggressive, not to be violent. Okay? I know you're sad, and it's important not to sleep all day. I know you're anxious, and it's still important to stay in the present moment right now. I know you're feeling sad and you don't want to see anybody, but it's important not to spend so much time alone, that it's important to connect. it's also important to be alone and rest, but it's also important to be with family and friends. So you're communicating what's helpful to do and what's helpful not to do. And this part you have already been doing. Now, this is, again, very, very critical. There's two parts to this that you see on the slide. The part on the left is very important to do first. Okay, not to do what's on the right first. So the first part is to accept. When we are going through something bad, it's important to accept how we feel. In the beginning, I mentioned that when we have something bad, when there's some danger, it's normal to feel anxiety. When you've lost something, it's important, it's completely normal to feel sad. If someone has attacked your country, it's completely important to be angry, right? And it's natural. If you have, if you've been separated from your family members, you might wind up feeling guilty, right? So all these emotions are there. So what's the first part is really important is that they accept, no matter what the feelings are, not what they're doing. You're not saying, yes, you're angry, so it's okay to be violent. That's not what you're saying. You're saying people have many feelings and thoughts after something like this happens, that emotions are there to help us. So it's completely natural for you to feel sad, anxious, happy, guilty, happy that you survived, guilty, ashamed, feeling angry and frustrated. What's important is that you just let those emotions pass. Okay? That you are not judging yourself for having these feelings, or getting angry that you're having these feelings, or worried that what does it mean for you that you're having these feelings. So people need to know that it's okay no matter what they feel. And if they feel nothing, again, you're saying what you're going through is really, it's real, it's hard, and it's okay to feel the way you do. And it's okay to think the way you do, right? You've already talked about what's helpful to do and not do. Right now, you're only talking about feeling and thinking. Because what happens is when we feel negative emotions, it's so hard to tolerate them that we don't want to feel it. So as a result, we try to stop ourselves from feeling bad. Or if, let's say, somebody is not feeling anything, they might try to make themselves feel more than they're feeling. And what you're saying is, it's not necessary, accept however you feel. And you're communicating what you're doing, which is be kind and compassionate to yourself and others. And don't judge yourself or others. So that's the part on the left. First, accept how you feel. Be kind, compassionate, non-judgmental. And just allow yourself to feel whatever you're feeling without questioning it, without judging yourself. Then allow yourself to have hope, even if it's hard right now. Okay? The reason this is important is because we know from research that if you have hope, if you have optimism, that's better for your mental health. So even if it's very difficult, allowing themselves to have hope. So one is helping them to remind themselves of all the things that make them strong. Allowing themselves to have hope that these challenges that they're facing will be overcome and that they will be able to cope with the difficulties that they're facing. And if there are any blessings, for example, let's say you are helping a family that's together, you can say, I want you to focus on the fact that your family is there together. Count whatever blessings you have today. And even though things are very, very hard right now, allow yourself to have hope that things will be better one day. And we know how powerful this is for the human mind to have that hope. But I said to you, it's important not to do the part on the right first or by itself. The reason is if you just go and do that and you don't do the first part, then what you're doing is, at least what the person is hearing is that you're saying everything is going to be all right. And you're not saying that. You're saying this is hard. You're right to feel the way you do. I get how much you're suffering. And you are helping them to see and have hope for the future. So this way they get that you understand how much they are suffering, and that one day having some hope for their ability to cope with difficulties, for whatever blessings they have today, and hope that the future will be better. And now let's focus on those people that might need more help, right? So people who are vulnerable, maybe they need more protection, they might be exploited more, right? So children and adolescents, people with health conditions or disabilities, and people at risk for discrimination or violence. So let's talk about children and adolescents. Because of their age, they are vulnerable. They're vulnerable because they can't take care of themselves. They need an adult to do that. They might be separated from their families. And if they're alone, they are more likely to be at risk for exploitation, especially girls. When a chaos and trauma and war occurs, right? Children are often separated from their caregivers. So as a result, they might be, taken into gangs or trafficked. So that's why helping children and adolescents is really important. And of course, how they react depends on their age and their development level. And what we know is that, let's say you're working with a family, we know that children take their sign from the adults around them. So if you're the adult around them, or if it's their parents around them, how the adults react will help them react. So if you see a family and your mother is completely crying and hysterical and is not able to calm down, it's important to move her aside, use the calming, grounding techniques, and then working with the child to help them calm down, right? Letting them know that this is hard and stressful, and helping them to feel that things will be okay, right, for them right now, today. And of course, some children might react better than others. So how children react to a major disaster like the war may fall into 4 categories. One, the older children might try to understand and try to become over-involved with it, or they may become so overwhelmed that they detach from what's going on around them, right? They may not want to listen to any information, or they might get so scared and wary that they don't want to be around people. And often children might regress to a less mature behavior. They might get clingy, they might need more parental assistance, they might need more self-care, they might start looking like younger children, in other words. So let's look at them. We'll look at them separately, but before I go into them separately, let me go over some general guidelines. What's most important is that you reunite children with their families with the help of child protection agencies. If a child is separated, you may not be able to help with that. And to help caregivers support caregivers in taking care of their own children. So let's say there's a mother who is hysterical, you calmed her down, you're using grounding techniques to calm the person down. Then you're allowing her to feed her child, as opposed to you feeding the child, because you want to help them help themselves. And again, safety is important. Sometimes children might need you to listen, talk, play to them. Just like with adults, allow them to feel whatever they're feeling. And again, depends on their age, but it's important not to give children too many details, right? The way that you might give an adult. Same thing as you did with adults. If you found out how a child has coped in the past to something stressful, learn how they've coped before, and then encourage them to use those behaviors. So these are just general guidelines that you can use. Now, young infants just need to be kept warm, held, comforted, right, and fed. So we want to keep them warm and safe, keep them away from loud noises. If there's a lot of chaos or loud noise, moving them to a different part. Cuddling them, hugging them is important, and keeping them to a regular feeding and sleeping schedule if possible, and speaking in a very calm and soft voice. So if you are helping a parent help their child, you are then encouraging the parent to keep them away from loud noises, cuddle them, hug them, and maintaining that structure for their feed and sleep if possible. And then helping the parent speak to them in a calm, soft voice that will just calm infants down right away. For children who are young, older than infants, but let's say school-age children, they might need extra time and attention, and they might need to be reminded often that they're feeling safe, right? Sometimes we know that young children start to feel like they're to blame for bad things happening. So letting them know, just like you would adults, that they're not to blame for anything, that if, let's say, they're separated, it wasn't their fault that their families are not with them. And to the extent possible, it's important not to separate them from caregivers, brothers, sisters, and family, all loved ones. Keeping them on a routine and schedule is also important. And again, you want to give them very simple answers about what has happened without scary details. And they might need to stay close to you if they're feeling afraid and clingy. And if you see a child and you think, wow, this child looks older, but they're behaving in a manner that they were younger, it's okay. That happened to children. So being patient with them is important. If they're older, but now they're wetting their bed suddenly or sucking their thumb. And so helping them to know that they're safe, that you're going to be there for them, and allowing them to play and relax if it's possible. As we get to older children and adolescents, they also need your time and attention. They also need structure and routine, but they may need more facts about what happened and what's going on. And they want you to talk to them, not talk down to them. You want to talk to them. So they want to be treated like adults. So again, you can allow them to be sad. Don't expect them to be tough. You might think, all right, you're older now, you can handle it. Come on, let's say there's an older adolescent who is more upset than a younger child. It's important not to say, come on, you're stronger. Look, your brother or sister is reacting so much better. Toughen up. It's okay. People react differently. So allow them to be sad. Don't expect them to be tough. And then listen to whatever thoughts and fears they have without being judgmental, but still setting clear expectations and rules. What dangers are they facing? How can you support them? How can they best avoid being harmed, right? And because they're older, you can do what you do with adults, encourage and allow opportunities for them to be helpful. Now, again, if you're working with the parent of a child, these are things that you can communicate to them, right? Understand that your children might start behaving like they're younger. It's important not to tell your child that they shouldn't feel this way, right? So whatever I'm sharing with you to share with them, if you're helping the parent, you can communicate this information to the parent. And then finally, those people who are at risk for discrimination or violence. They have health conditions, women, girls, certain ethnic groups, it's people who are disabled, they're deaf, they can't walk. You want to help them to get to a safe place, meet their needs, and immediately find out about what things they need. Do they need an asthma inhaler? Do they need some other medication for their heart, right? And you want to stay with them until someone comes to take care of them and connect them immediately to a protection or support agency. We know that people in these groups are much more likely to be exploited. And as I mentioned, girls can be trafficked easily. So it's really important that we connect them until there is a responsible grown-up who can take care of them. So this is psychological first aid as you're giving it to other people. For the last part of the talk, I will be talking about how to help yourself. But we have talked about what the problem is, what the good news is, what the positive is, and then we've talked about psychological first aid. You prepared, and then you've looked, listened, and linked. So before we end, I want to encourage you as volunteers to take care of yourself. First of all, before you volunteered, I hope that you learned what is involved and realistically assessed if you can volunteer. Because even though helping others is really good for our well-being, it can also cause stress. So it's important that you take time to take care of yourself and to rest and reflect That's really, really important, because you've seen that by being a helper, by volunteering, by helping others in need, you might need help yourself. So all the tools that we went over, use PFA on yourself, practice PFA on yourself. Look and see, do I need help? Acknowledge your feelings. Listen to yourself. Accept all the feelings you're having, right? And then link to the information we went over today. Learn how to adapt by using that information to help yourself. So beyond using PFA skills to help yourself, right, to manage your stress, to manage your compassion fatigue, keep reasonable working hours, rest in between, even for short periods. You know, maybe you'll work with another partner who does shifts and doing shifts with people, right? You also have to accept that you may not be able to help everyone. So practicing self-compassion is really important. Reminding yourself that you're doing good and that you're doing your best. And then using other volunteers in your friend circle and your loved ones to support you, because you're supporting other people. Having your family support you in what you're doing is extremely important, because otherwise you're going to be burnt out. Okay, so I want you to think of it this way. For example, when we are in an airplane, we are asked to put our own seatbelt before we put the seatbelt on our child, right? You have to first be in a mind space to be able to help other people. Otherwise, you're not able to help anybody. And then resting, relaxing, and then reflecting on what you're going through. So helping others going through a crisis is not easy. So take the time to acknowledge what you've accomplished, take pride in what you're doing and have done, that you are making a difference in the lives of the most vulnerable people. So that way you rest, you reflect, and relax, okay? And what do? You can talk about your experience of helping in the crisis with someone you trust, okay? And if things didn't go well, like let's say you talked to somebody and it didn't wind up going well, learn from it, talk about it, be compassionate to yourself about what didn't go well, but then learn the limits of what you can do and what you can't do. Maybe there are certain people it's harder for you to help, okay? Maybe if you're helping children, you get too upset for them. And so it'd be much easier for you to help adults. It's important to know your limits, and then getting compassion and support from others if you're feeling compassion fatigued, if you're feeling traumatized by what you're hearing or what you're witnessing, and of course, seeking professional help if needed. And then, making sure that you appreciate and express gratitude for whatever you have. We know from research that the more you express gratitude for the things you have, when you count your blessings and you keep hope alive, that is better for your own mental health. And then finally, just recognize you can't help everybody. That assume that most people are resilient, will recover on their own, right? But that some people may need skills for psychological recovery, or they might need CBT. So you can then refer them later, but do not suggest to anyone that they're at risk. People are suggestible when they're under stress. So it's important that we not suggest them. And the end, just remember that balanced optimism improves our well-being. So try to convey to yourself and to the people you're helping to keep hope alive. Balanced optimism. You're not promising them that the war is going to end, things will be okay. You're just saying one day, you will feel better. One day things will be okay, right? So they need to have that hope alive and need to believe that they're resilient. So it's important for them to realize that. Well, thank you very much. If anybody would like to ask me any questions about the presentation, I've put my email down. So if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you very much.
Na ten moment nie mamy żadnych pytań.
Well, we don't have any questions in the chat, but maybe some questions might emerge. Maybe someone would like to ask a question via chat or tell us. I don't know if that's possible here on Zoom to speak, but perhaps it can be done via the chat option, or rather the Q&A option, I guess, in this case. Well, it's very important, Lata, that you've been talking about helping oneself to make this realistic, to realign what we have, you know, to kind of adapt our impact on the situation. We have to keep in mind that we need to stay healthy, and there are so many people really getting involved in Poland in all areas, really, in all kinds of ways, and we are quite concerned that at a certain point this may have a negative impact on these people. It's as if they didn't set themselves any borders sometimes, you know, no limits, but it's a natural reaction, this first phase of enthusiasm and of energy also to help others. But we know that this may actually turn into weariness, and people might experience fatigue at the end of the day. So what do you think about the situations of this kind of natural, you know, getting into this state of weariness, of fatigue, of being weakened by this whole situation?
Yeah, I think that's the time that I think that's completely natural. We know that people who help others can be have this happen to them. So it's really important that people, first of all, ask themselves, like, do I need a break? Okay, or even if, let's say, you have the energy and you haven't begun volunteering, it's important to ask yourself, what is involved? What will I be seeing? What will I be doing? What will I be hearing? And can I, and is that something I can do at this moment in my life? Understanding the time commitment, understanding what emotionally will be required of you, and making that assessment. And even if you've agreed to do it, now you've started doing it, making sure that you rest, making sure you check in with yourself to say, am I still okay? Like, you know, I've been hearing a lot of hard things. Maybe I can use the PFA skills for myself, you know, going back and thinking about how you can listen to yourself. How can you rest? How can you stick to a routine? Making sure that you are all the things that you're trying to do for others that you're doing for yourself. And if needed, just taking a break. And then when things are over, our mind needs to process them. So maybe talk to a friend about what you just went through, you know, helping somebody else. Maybe keep a journal, right? Maybe contemplate on it later, because when things happen that are so out of the range of normal human experience, that it winds up being right up in our memories and it can affect our emotions deeply. So it's important that you not be afraid of your emotions. The fact that you feel sad, or let's say you're trying to help somebody and you start crying, right? Obviously, if you're, let's say you have tears in your eyes and you're hearing someone's sad news, and that's okay. But making sure that you are strong enough at that moment to support them. And if you feel that'll be hard for you to do, non-judgmentally keeping yourself away. It just means you're human. But maybe you can do something else, and that's fine too, right? So accepting your own emotions, accepting what you can handle, right? And not mistaking how you feel for what you can do. You might be really anxious and really sad and still be able to help people. So realistically assessing your strengths is important. And then realistically, you know, taking breaks and not overworking just because you feel so passionately about it.
Mamy tutaj pytanie.
Yes, we've got a question here from a participant. How to react in a situation when people expect, actually they demand even more than we can give them? Because in schools, we have a wave of hate also, you know, Polish and Ukrainian children, hate directed against Russian children. So any actions we might take in this respect?
Yeah, I think that's important to accept that people might get angry with you. They might get angry with you because you can't give them what you need. It could be that they want information and you can't give it to them, or they want something and you can't give it to them. So it's important to stay calm and not get frustrated and remind them of what you can do. So you can say, I completely understand that you are angry. I completely get that you want this information, and I really wish I could give it to you. I will try to find out and I will give it to you. I wish that I could do this for you. I get why you want it. So on the one hand, you are normalizing how they feel, and yet you are reminding them of what you can do. But of course, you want to keep yourself safe. So if there's any danger in the person being violent to you, it's really important to get your supervisor, and important for you not to place yourself in that position. And the racial discrimination, you said, it's completely natural that people might be terrified of that and want you to protect them. And I think it's important to help them see that when people are under stress, there's a natural tendency to get angry and frustrated and take out their anger on other people. And to understand that accepting how they feel and yet not behaving differently to those people is really important, because you can't control what people feel. But what you're doing is you're encouraging them to do what they can do. So you're not promising things you can't deliver, and you are not, you're helping them. You can't control what they'll do. All you can do is encourage them to not do it. But you're empathizing with how they feel in that moment.
Ja mam takie pytanie od
So I've
siebie.
got a question, a personal question, because in Poland, there are many families that have actually taken some people from Ukraine into their homes, into their apartments. And sometimes these are single people, single individuals. And I have been receiving more and more signals about these people being unable to cope mentally, psychologically. Do you have an idea of how to perhaps, integrate these people somehow to connect them with others, because they are sad in these and being within a community would help, even meeting some other Ukrainians. I'm talking about refugees who are also individually accepted into people's homes. So there's a problem with connecting with others.
Right. So I think that the people who have been taken into the homes need to be connected to the people who are other Ukrainians. And then the people who are taking them into their homes, right, if they're going through a hard time, connecting them with other people who are helping the Ukrainians will be really important. So they understand that they also need support. It's hard to take someone who is traumatized into your house. It's hard to be there for them. So it's important that they're connected as a community so they can share experiences, spend time with each other. So that way they're not always giving, that they're there. And then also learning practical tips about what other people are doing. How are they coping? It will also allow them to keep their own limits, right? Knowing your own limits. What can I do? What can't I do? And then ultimately, if all of that doesn't help, then maybe it's time to say, I'm not able to keep this person in my house. Okay, how can I help move them to a place that is better for them? Because I am right now under so much stress that I don't want to make the situation worse for myself or the person I'm trying to help. So knowing the limits of your own abilities is really important. You might mean really, really well. This kudos. It's amazing that you're taking somebody into your home. And please make sure you're safe, that you're feeling emotionally healthy, and get the person to a place or a person that can help them today. It doesn't mean you can't help them in the future. It just means right now you've done enough, or right now is difficult for you. And maybe you can help in a different way. You might still want to help, but maybe there's a different way that you can help. So really accepting where you are without judgment, right? You might mean well, but don't judge yourself at this moment. Are there any other questions?
Yes, it's a tremendously important aspect. Polish people who have actually taken so much, taken on so many duties, and they reacted in this unique way. Definitely, they will start feeling an increasing burden of the situation, because these are conditions. They have limited living conditions also. Small apartments, small flats. It's not that you let out an individual flat where you don't live. You actually live together. The families accepting refugees and the refugees. So, and in Poland, we say that, after 3 days, guests start to become a bit more than guests, and they become too much. And it's important to think about that hopefully the war will end as soon as possible, but a long time will pass before these people will even be able to make a move, not to speak about moving back into their homes. So I also wanted to talk about these volunteers who help on a daily basis, and they clash against this suffering of people, 24/7, basically.
Yeah.
And at the same time, as Poles, we have a lot of tendency to feel guilty, to raise the bar really high, to raise expectations constantly. And how should we navigate all this? You're saying, yes, find your limits and take care of yourself, but right, we are dealing with people who may have some loyalty related obligations. They may know how hard Poland was traumatized as a country. Poland is a country which underwent trauma, and we may feel this obligation. We may feel obliged, despite all the difficulties we have, we may feel obliged to help. What then? What should we do?
Yeah, I think that's perfectly natural. I think, yes, we are all obliged to help. I think that's the fundamental truth, right? All of us need to help in any way that we can. So on the one hand, you need to rise to the challenge and get more people involved who can help. So that is absolutely true. You will be going beyond what you normally do. That's absolutely true. And I think where you need to maintain your limits is when you feel that I'm in a place right now that I can't help myself, that I am suffering so much, that I am worried that I might not be helpful to this person, right? So if I have reached the point where I might not be helpful to the person, or start getting angry with the person, or if I'm able to, if I start to resent them, right? So that's the balance, right? The balance is, of course, all of us need to do things that we are not doing normally. We are working all hours, we are helping everybody, and these are your neighbors. Of course, you want to help them. It's a matter of just doing whatever you can to help yourself while you're helping them, and really to know your limits, meaning if you reached a point of suffering that you are not useful to anybody, then that's the point where you say, okay, what else can I do right now? And it doesn't mean you can't help. It really is a matter of figuring out, how can I best help? Okay, what is the best way that I can be of help to people in the situation? So it's not either I'm helping or I'm not helping. It is to say, what can I do? Maybe I can go out and get more volunteers. Maybe I can help with, having people call people, so maybe I can be the one giving people information, right? So figuring out what is your best ability to help in this situation. And of course, you will be doing things you didn't expect to do. So part of it is accepting that it will be harder for a while for you, for your whole family, for your country. And yes, you will have your own worries about what this means for your future with the refugees coming in. There's like over 10 million refugees, right? So I completely get the worry. And so allowing yourself to have it. So let's say you feel guilty, like, how can I worry about my own future if I'm trying to help them? Allow yourself to feel it. right? To say it's human, it's natural human inclination. I'm going to be worried about myself and my family and my own country. And yet I'm going to behave not the way I feel. I will still help, but it's okay for me to feel this way. It's okay to be worried about myself. I can still help someone and still worry about myself. So just non-judgmentally accepting where you are and figuring out what you can do and you cannot do.
Nie ma więcej pytań.
We don't have any other questions, it seems. Well, there's a lot of acceptance in what we've been saying, a lot of empowerment, you know, coming to terms with the fact that that, you know, accepting that we worry is not bad, is natural actually. So that there is this agency that we can actually there's a lot of validation in this, and that we can you know feel as there are so many needs, actually countless needs we are facing.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, tolerating uncertainty is very hard for all of us, right? Not knowing, will the war end? When will it end? How will it end? There's so many things we don't know, and that makes everybody more uncomfortable. So on the one hand, allowing yourself to tolerate the uncertainty, to say, I don't know the answer. On the other hand, creating whatever, focusing on all the certainties you do know. What I do know is this is what I can do right now. This is how I can help people. This is how I can help myself. Thinking about what you can do for that day, for the next day, for the next week, and allowing yourself not to go too far into the future, just focusing on the present moment and saying, and then using those grounding techniques on yourself, right? Allowing yourself to just be there today, and allowing and not feeling guilty about relaxing. If you want to get together with friends and just talk and, you know, have a meal, have a drink, that's okay. Allowing yourself, like, not feeling guilty if you are resting, if you're relaxing, if you're watching a movie or having fun, right? Allowing yourself to be able to have those little joys in your life, because that's completely okay. And that is going to make you a better helper. It's going to make you a better volunteer.
Czyli tak naprawdę mamy bardzo dużo do zrobienia.
We actually have a lot to do, so it's worthwhile to get involved. It's good to notice that these needs are there and we can contribute to helping these people. But we need to do it mindfully and in a wise way. We need to learn it. The psychological first aid is composed of several very important elements that translate into this help being effective, and also take into account the fact that we take care of ourselves. Is there any literature on the efficiency of psychological first aid?
There is, well, since it's not an intervention, there are no randomized controlled trials on it, but it has been used. These tools have been used in some form or the other since the Renaissance. You know, much of the knowledge we've gained is from World War I and World War II. And then there are natural studies, naturalized studies that have been done for people who've used psychological first aid to know that they're effective. And the important ingredients really are to focus on things that are really, really important today, getting support, accepting your feelings, and having hope for the future. So in summary, we went through psychological first aid, you know, learning what a traumatic event is, learning what PFA is, right? So what to do, who does it, how does it help, and then learning how to prepare, how to look for people with needs, how to listen to them effectively, how to provide them with emotional comfort and safety. It's amazing how resilient people are, and we know that from centuries of work. So it's really using their natural resilience to help them cope. And you might have the need to do things for people, but know that you are helping them by allowing them to help themselves. That's your goal. Your goal is not to do psychotherapy. Your goal is to give them enough tools, enough support, and enough resources that they can then help themselves. Are there other
Well,
tools?
Lata, thank you so much. It's been really very informative, very, very important piece of information. A lot of acceptance, as I'm saying, to whatever we experience. And the normality is so wide, and really we can see here all sorts of different reactions, and that's okay. Let's accept it, and let's not lose hope.
Yep, that's very critical.
Excellent.
Yes, absolutely. All right, well, thank you very much for inviting me to speak. I'm really thinking of all of you right now so much. It's such a hard time for your country, helping everybody else, and I really am so filled with admiration and pride at what everybody in Poland is doing right now. Thank you.
Dzięki wielkie. Let's hope we shall be in
Thank you.
touch, and you will come to Poland again,
I would.
as you have been right now.
Yep, I would love to come to Poland. That's a dream. Thank you so much. Okay, bye-bye. Thank you.
Lata is, let me just say one more thing. Lata is a CBT practitioner,
Yeah,
active practitioner in the World Organization. So no doubt, this is a wonderful way of showing how this sort of approach and understanding of what people are going through and how we can help can be really very helpful.
thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Joanna. Thank you, Thomas.
Thanks a lot.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.